It wasn't the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. That is a comfortable lie we tell children. The rock was merely the bullet. What actually exterminated 75% of all life on Earth was the collapse of the invisible machine that kept them alive. We tend to see nature as a collection of animals, but nature is actually a complex invisible skeleton of chemistry, temperature, and light. On a spring day 66 million years ago, that skeleton shattered. To understand how a dynasty that lasted 160 million years could vanish in a single afternoon, we must stop looking at the monsters and start looking at the system. The dinosaurs did not fail. They were biological masterpieces, perfectly adapted to their world. Their lungs were more efficient than ours. Their bones were stronger. They were not obsolete. They were simply evicted by a physics experiment gone wrong. This invisible skeleton I mention consists of the atmospheric layers, the ocean currents, and the carbon cycle. It is a delicate web of interdependence. The predator eats the herbivore eats the plant eats the sunlight. If you remove the sunlight, the entire structure collapses from the bottom up. The asteroid did not hunt the dinosaurs. It simply turned off the lights. And in the dark, the invisible skeleton fell apart. The day it happened started like any other. It was likely late spring in the northern hemisphere. The forests of modern-day Mexico were teeming with life. We know this because the fossil record shows flowers in bloom and fish with full bellies. There was no warning, no ominous music. Just a second sun appearing in the sky, brighter than the first, growing larger with every heartbeat. It was the last moment of the Cretaceous period. The impactor was a rock about 10 kilometers wide, roughly the size of Mount Everest. It was traveling at 20 kilometers per second, 60 times the speed of sound. When it struck the shallow waters of the Yucatan Peninsula, it didn't just crash. It pierced the Earth's crust. The energy released was equivalent to 10 billion Hiroshima bombs detonating simultaneously. But the explosion was not the true killer. The true killer was what happened to the sky. The impact punched a hole in the atmosphere, creating a vacuum that sucked debris into space. Millions of tons of vaporized rock, sulfur, and water were ejected into the upper atmosphere. This is where the mechanics of the extinction began. The debris didn't stay in space. It cooled, condensed into tiny glass beads called spherules, and began to rain back down on the entire planet. The sky was literally falling. Imagine a rain of molten glass. As these trillions of spherules re-entered the atmosphere, the friction turned the sky into a broiler. For several hours, the air temperature at ground level spiked to hundreds of degrees. It was like being inside an oven set to broil. The invisible skeleton of the atmosphere, which usually protects life from space, had been turned into a weapon. The air itself became the enemy. Most animals exposed to the open air died in these first few hours. They were cooked alive by the infrared radiation of the burning sky. The mighty T-Rex, the armored ankylosaurs, their defenses meant nothing against heat. The only survivors were those who could hide, those who could burrow underground or dive deep into the water. The invisible skeleton of protection had selected its first wave of victims based purely on shelter. But the heat was fleeting. What followed was the silence. The soot and sulfur injected into the stratosphere spread around the globe, blocking out the sun. A darkness deeper than night settled over the Earth. This darkness would last for months, perhaps years. And this is where the true collapse of the system began. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stopped. The plants, the foundation of the invisible skeleton, went into a coma. When the plants stopped growing, the herbivores starved. When the herbivores died, the carnivores turned on each other, and then they starved. It was a domino effect of caloric bankruptcy. The largest animals, which required the most food, were the first to fall. The dinosaurs were victims of their own success. Their massive size, once their greatest advantage, became their death sentence in a world without calories. This was the shattering of the invisible skeleton. An ecosystem is a flow of energy. The sun gives energy to the leaf to the beetle to the bird. The darkness severed the link between the sun and the leaf. The flow of energy stopped. The machine ground to a halt. It wasn't violence that finished the dinosaurs. It was an energy crisis. They ran out of fuel in a freezing, dark world. The temperature plummeted. The tropical greenhouse of the Cretaceous became a frozen wasteland. This impact winter killed off the survivors of the initial heat. The reptiles, who relied on external heat to regulate their body temperature, were sluggish and helpless. They froze in their tracks. The world belonged to those who could generate their own heat, the tiny furry mammals hiding in the burrows. Here lies the paradox of the extinction. The meek inherited the earth not because they were stronger, but because they were weaker. The mammals were small scavengers and could eat anything: insects, roots, rotting flesh. They didn't need much food to survive. Their invisible skeleton was flexible. The dinosaurs were specialized biological Ferraris. The mammals were rugged all-terrain vehicles. In a broken world, efficiency beats power. Also, the oceans were dying. The sulfur from the impact combined with water vapor to create sulfuric acid rain. The oceans became acidic, dissolving the shells of microscopic plankton. The marine food web collapsed just like the terrestrial one. The great marine reptiles, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, vanished. The silence of the land was mirrored by the silence of the deep. Yet, life is stubborn. In the geological record, right above the layer of death, the KPG boundary, there is a sudden explosion of fern spores. This is called the fern spike. Ferns are disaster flora. They are the first to colonize a ruined world. This layer of green marks the begin of the recovery. The invisible skeleton began to knit itself back together, but it was a different shape now. The architecture had changed. The old landlords were gone. The suppression was lifted. For 160 million years, mammals had been kept small, living in the shadows of the giants, terrified to come out by day. Now, the shadows were gone. The day belonged to them. The extinction event was not an end, but a violent reset button. It cleared the stage for the rise of intelligence, for the rise of us. But did they all die? We often say the dinosaurs went extinct, but that is technically false. One lineage survived. The small feathered, two-legged theropods. They were small enough to hide, warm-blooded enough to endure the cold, and beak-equipped to eat seeds when meat was scarce. Today we call them birds. Every time you see a chicken, you are looking at a surviving dinosaur. The invisible skeleton of their biology was robust enough to endure the collapse. They shrank, they adapted, and they took to the skies. The T-Rex is gone, but its cousin is singing in your garden. This teaches us that survival is not about being the biggest or the baddest. It is about being adaptable. It is about fitting into the cracks when the world falls apart. The story of the KPG extinction is a warning. It shows us how fragile the invisible skeleton of our planet really is. We rely on the same atmosphere, the same food webs, the same carbon cycles. We think we are the masters of this world, just as the dinosaurs did. But the system is indifferent to its passengers. If the chemistry changes, the tenants are evicted. We are currently testing the limits of this skeleton ourselves. We are changing the atmosphere, acidifying the oceans, and stringing the food webs. We are not waiting for a rock from space. We are becoming the asteroid. To understand our own future, we must look deeper into the past. We must analyze not just the death of the dinosaurs, but the rebirth that followed. Let's rewind the clock to 10 minutes after impact. While the Yucatan was vaporized instantly, the rest of the world was experiencing a delayed apocalypse. The energy of the impact was so massive that it didn't just shake the ground. It made the earth ring like a bell. Seismic waves, usually invisible, became visible ripples on the surface. Imagine standing in a forest in North America and watching the solid ground roll towards you like the sea. This was a magnitude 11 earthquake. For context, the strongest earthquake ever recorded by humans was a 9.5. This scale is logarithmic, meaning a magnitude 11 is not twice as strong. It is thousands of times stronger. It was violent enough to toss massive dinosaurs into the air. The invisible skeleton of the tectonic plates, which provides the stable floor for all life, had suddenly become a liquid trap. Gravity seemed to glitch. Following the ground waves came the air blast. The explosion created a pressure wave traveling at supersonic speeds. If you were close enough to hear the sound, you were already dead. The sound was not a noise. It was a physical wall of compressed air. It flattened forests thousands of kilometers away from the impact site. It ruptured the eardrums of every living creature on the American continent before they even knew they were in danger. This blast wave circled the globe multiple times. It was the Earth screaming. The atmosphere, usually the medium that carries the gentle songs of birds, became a hammer. The invisible skeleton of air pressure, which keeps our lungs inflated and our blood chemistry balanced, fluctuated wildly. Animals didn't just die from the force. They died from the sheer acoustic trauma of a planet breaking apart. The horror wasn't limited to the surface. The seismic energy traveled through the center of the Earth and converged on the exact opposite side of the planet, the antipode. This point was likely in the Indian Ocean. When the waves met there, they focused like a lens. The crust at the antipode fractured under the stress. It is believed that this triggered or intensified massive volcanic eruptions in the Deccan Traps of India. So while one side of the world was being hit by a rock from space, the other side was being torn apart by the focused energy of that rock coming up from below. The Earth was being attacked from both outside and inside. The invisible skeleton of the planetary core was transmitting the death warrant to the safest place on the map. There was nowhere to hide. Then came the water. The impact displaced an ocean. It created a megatsunami over a kilometer high. To visualize this, imagine a wave taller than the Burj Khalifa crashing onto the shores of the Gulf of Mexico. This wall of water didn't just wash the beach. It traveled hundreds of kilometers inland, scouring the bedrock clean. It reshaped the geography of continents in a matter of hours. We find evidence of this today. In geological layers far from the sea, we find chaotic deposits of marine sand, shark teeth, and tree trunks mixed together in a blender of violence. The ocean had invaded the land. The boundary between the two realms, a crucial part of the Earth's skeleton, was erased. Marine life died in forests. Forest life died in the sea. It was total chaos. As the tsunami receded, the sky began to betray the survivors. The ejecta, the rock thrown into space, began its return journey. As we mentioned, this heated the atmosphere, but it also created a visual spectacle of terror. The sky was filled with billions of shooting stars. A beautiful, silent display of fireworks that signaled the turning on of the global oven. The light from these re-entering meteors was bright enough to blind any creature looking up. The biological skeleton of sight, evolved over millions of years to detect predators and food, was overwhelmed. Animals were blinded by the very sky that used to guide their migration. The sensory input of the entire biosphere was overloaded with white noise and white light. The heat pulse didn't just cook animals. It ignited the world. Global wildfires broke out simultaneously. This wasn't a fire spreading from tree to tree. It was spontaneous combustion on a continental scale. The dried vegetation, dead from the initial blast or drought, caught fire all at once. The invisible skeleton of the carbon cycle, the trees that store carbon, released it all back into the atmosphere in a single day. Sift from these fires added to the dust from the impact. If the asteroid was the door slamming shut, the smoke from the fires was the sealant that made it airtight. The sun was now fighting against a double layer of blockade. Rock dust from above and smoke from below. The Earth was sealing itself into a tomb. The mechanisms of climate regulation were shattered. As the fires burned, the chemistry of the rain changed. The impact had vaporized rocks rich in gypsum, releasing massive amounts of sulfur. When this sulfur mixed with water vapor, it created sulfuric acid. It didn't just rain water. It rained battery acid. This acid rain fell into the oceans, drastically lowering the pH. This is known as ocean acidification. This was the death blow for the marine food web. Organisms with calcium carbonate shells like plankton and coral simply dissolved. Their skeletons, quite literally, melted away. Since these organisms are the foundation of the marine diet, when they vanished, everything above them starved. The invisible skeleton of the ocean's chemistry had turned corrosive. The water became a solvent for life. Within days, the heat dissipated, replaced by a deep supernatural chill. The dust and smoke reflected the sunlight back into space. The Earth entered a hyper-cold state. Temperatures dropped by 30 degrees Celsius. Tropical jungles froze. Dinosaurs who were adapted to a warm, humid world found themselves in a nuclear winter. They had no winter coats. They had no hibernation instinct. This thermal shock was the final filter. It selected for size and metabolism. Large animals couldn't find enough food to fuel their massive bodies in the cold. Small animals could burrow into the relatively warm ground and sleep it off. The invisible skeleton of thermal regulation failed for the giants. The physics of being big, once a sign of dominance, was now a liability. The darkness lasted for perhaps 2 years. In that time, photosynthesis effectively stopped. The planet turned brown and gray. This period is known as the Strangelove Ocean in geology, an ocean where the surface is dead and life only exists in the deep. The invisible skeleton of energy flow from sun to plant to animal was severed at the very first link. Fungi thrived. The world became a garden of mushrooms and decay. Fungi do not need light, they feed on death. For a brief period, the earth was ruled not by plants or animals, but by the decomposers. They were the undertakers of the Mesozoic era, breaking down the bodies of the fallen giants to prepare the soil for the next world. Yet, in this rotting, frozen, dark world, there was a pulse. Deep in the burrows, eating the fungi and the insects, were our ancestors. They were used to the dark. They were used to being ignored. The collapse of the dinosaur's invisible skeleton was the construction of ours. The very conditions that killed the T-Rex: cold, darkness, small food sources, with the conditions the mammals had been training for. The asteroid didn't just destroy, it selected. It was a cosmic audit of life on Earth. It asked a simple question: can you survive without the sun? The dinosaurs answered no. The mammals answered yes. And that answer determined the next 66 million years of history. Eventually, the sky cleared. The dust settled. The sulfur washed out of the atmosphere, and the sun broke through the haze for the first time in years. The invisible skeleton of the light cycle was repaired. But the world it illuminated was unrecognizable. The forests were gone. The giants were gone. The silence was deafening. The earth was a blank canvas, waiting for the first stroke of paint. The first colonizers were ferns. We call this the fern spike. For thousands of years, the earth was covered in a monotonous carpet of green ferns. They stabilized the soil and began to rebuild the carbon cycle. They were the scaffold upon which the new biosphere would be built. Slowly, the flowering plants returned, exploding in diversity to fill the empty niches left by the gymnosperms, pines, and conifers. With the return of plants, the survivors emerged from their bunkers. The mammals, who had spent 160 million years as nocturnal, rat-sized scavengers, blinked into the sunlight. They found a world with no guards. The T-Rex was gone. The raptors were gone. The ceiling that had kept them small always shattered. Evolution, which usually moves at a glacial pace, hit the accelerator. This phenomenon is called ecological release. When a dominant species is removed, the survivors expand rapidly to fill the void. In just a few million years, a blink of an eye in geological time, mammals grew from the size of rats to the size of dogs, then cows. They didn't just get bigger, they got weird. They experimented with every shape and strategy to see what would stick in this new reality. But the mammals didn't claim the throne immediately. The dinosaurs made one final, terrifying attempt to rule the world. The surviving birds, now free from their larger cousins, grew to nightmare proportions. These were the terror birds, Farouche races. Standing 3 meters tall with beaks like pickaxes, they were the top predators of the Paleocene. For a brief moment, the dinosaurs were back in charge. These avian monsters hunted the early mammals. It was a brutal war for dominance. The invisible skeleton of the food chain was in flux. Who would be the predator, and who would be the prey? The terror birds were fast and lethal, proving that the dinosaur blueprint was still superior in combat. But they had a flaw. They laid eggs. Eggs are vulnerable. Mammals carried their young inside them. This reproductive difference likely decided the war. In a chaotic world full of scavengers, leaving your babies in a shell on the ground was risky. Mammals, with their internal gestation, pregnancy, acted as mobile bunkers for their offspring. They could run from fire, flood, or predators while protecting the next generation. The invisible skeleton of mammal biology provided a security upgrade that the birds couldn't match. Slowly, the terror birds were outcompeted. The mammals grew larger and smarter. They began to hunt in packs. They developed complex social structures. The age of the reptile was truly over, replaced by the age of milk and fur. The earth was getting warmer, wetter, and more crowded. The invisible skeleton of the ecosystem was becoming complex again, but with new actors playing the old roles. About 10 million years after the impact, the Earth hit a fever spike called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. A massive release of carbon, possibly from ocean methane, turned the planet into a hothouse. There was no ice at the poles. Palm trees grew in Antarctica. This heat supercharged the reptiles one last time. We see monsters like Titanoboa, a snake the size of a school bus, slithering through the swamps of Colombia. But for mammals, this heat was a challenge. Large bodies overheat easily. So many mammals dwarfed, shrank, to survive the heat, while others returned to the water. This is where the story takes a poetic turn. Some wolf-like mammals, finding the land too crowded or too hot, began to hunt in the shallows. They were walking back into the ocean, the very place their ancestors crawled out of millions of years ago. This was the birth of the whales. It is a perfect example of how the invisible skeleton of nature recycles designs. The ocean had a vacancy for a large predator because the marine reptiles were dead. Evolution molded a bear-like mammal into a torpedo shape to fill that vacancy. They traded legs for fins and fur for blubber. The ghost of the mosasaur was replaced by the ancestor of the blue whale. This return to the sea highlights the fluidity of the skeleton. Life flows like water into whatever container is available. If the container is ocean apex predator, nature will carve a creature to fit it, regardless of whether it starts with scales or fur. The function remains, only the form changes. The machine repairs itself using whatever parts are lying around. While the whales conquered the deep, another group of small mammals found safety in the canopy. The forests had returned, taller and denser than ever. These creatures developed grasping hands to hold branches and forward-facing eyes to judge distances for jumping. They were the first primates. Our ancestors. They didn't rule the world. They hid in the attic. Their survival depended on a different kind of invisible skeleton: social intelligence. Living in complex 3D environments required better brains. They had to remember where the fruit was ripe, who was a friend, and who was an enemy. The pressure to navigate the social web began to enlarge the neocortex. The seed of human consciousness was planted not on the savanna, but in the dark safety of the Eocene trees. But the Earth is never stable for long. The hothouse ended. The continents continued to drift. Antarctica moved to the South Pole and froze, locking up ocean water and cooling the planet. The dense jungles began to break apart, replaced by a new, harsh landscape, the grasslands. This change in the invisible skeleton of the terrain would force our ancestors out of the trees and onto their feet. Grass is a brutal plant. It is tough, full of silica, glass, and offers no place to hide. To survive in the grass, you need to be fast or you need to be smart. The cooling of the earth set the stage for the final act of our story. The Garden of Eden of the jungle was drying up. The mammals were about to face their next great filter. The transition from forest to savanna was a crisis. The primates had to choose: stay in the shrinking patches of trees and dwindle, or descend into the sea of grass and adapt. A few brave or desperate apes stood up on two legs. Standing allowed them to see predators over the tall grass. It freed their hands to carry food and tools. It was a biomechanical hack that changed everything. Bipedalism, walking on two legs, was risky. It made us slower and exposed our vital organs. But it was the key to unlocking the tool-using brain. The invisible skeleton of our anatomy shifted to support a vertical spine. We became the watchers of the horizon. We stopped looking at the branches and started looking at the sky, the same sky that had brought death millions of years ago. We have reached the point where the invisible skeleton shifts from biological to technological. The tool, the fire, the language. These were the new structures that allowed a weak, hairless ape to dominate the planet. We didn't have the claws of the Tyrannosaurus or the size of the tiger Naboa. We built our own claws. We built our own skins. We outsourced our evolution to our inventions. But as we claimed dominion over the earth, we forgot the lesson of the dinosaurs. We forgot that we are part of the system, not above it. We began to burn the buried forest of the Carboniferous coal and the liquefied plankton of the Jurassic oil. We began to re-engineer the atmosphere, unknowingly recreating the conditions of the thermal maximums of the past. We are the first species in history to decouple our survival from our biology. We stopped waiting for evolution to give us warmer fur. We skinned other animals. We stopped waiting for sharper claws. We forged steel. We built an external skeleton of technology. This allowed us to bypass the natural checks and balances that limit every other population. We spread from the equator to the poles, not by adapting to the cold, but by carrying the fire with us. This technological exoskeleton made us powerful, but it also made us hungry. A biological animal runs on calories from food. A technological animal runs on external energy. Wood was not enough. Wind was not enough. We needed a concentrated power source to fuel our expansion, so we looked down. We dug into the earth and found the buried sunlight of the past. We found the Carboniferous forests and the Jurassic plankton. We call them fossil fuels, but let's call them what they really are: liquid ghosts. Coal is the compressed remains of the forests that grew before fungi evolved to eat them. Oil is the liquefied bodies of ancient marine life. When we burn a gallon of gasoline, we are releasing the solar energy that was trapped by prehistoric life over millions of years. We are burning the past to power the present. But there is a cost. That carbon was buried for a reason. The Earth's invisible skeleton had sequestered it underground to keep the atmosphere stable and cool. By digging it up and burning it, We are reversing millions of years of geological sequestration in a couple of centuries. We are taking the carbon that killed the dinosaurs, ancestors during the Permian extinction, and pumping it back into the sky. The atmosphere does not care about intent. It does not care if the CO2 comes from a volcanic eruption, like the Deccan Traps, or from a tailpipe. It only cares about physics. Carbon dioxide traps heat. As we thicken the blanket of CO2, we are turning up the global thermostat. We are unknowingly recreating the thermal conditions of the Eocene, but at a speed that biology cannot match. Evolution needs time. We are not giving it any. This is the Anthropocene, the age of humans. It is defined by the fact that human activity is now the dominant influence on climate and the environment. We have become a geological force. If you look at the stratigraphy of the future, there will be a distinct line of plastic, radioactive isotopes, and chicken bones marking our era. We are leaving a layer just as distinct as the iridium layer left by the asteroid. We often fear an asteroid impact, yet we are doing the asteroid's work ourselves. The rate of species extinction today is estimated to be 100 to 1,000 times higher than the natural background rate. This is the sixth mass extinction, but unlike the KPG event, which was a bang, this is a whimper. It is a slow-motion car crash. We are dismantling the invisible skeleton of the biosphere rivet by rivet, claiming we need the metal. The asteroid killed by blocking the sun. We are killing by trapping the heat. The mechanism is different, but the result, a collapse of the food web, is the same. We are seeing insect populations plummet. Birds are vanishing. The intricate tapestry of life, woven over 66 million years since the last reset, is unraveling. We are cutting the threads to weave our own clothes, forgetting that we are standing on the rug. The ocean is sick again. Just like in the KPG extinction, the oceans are absorbing the excess carbon and turning acidic. Coral reefs, the rainforest of the sea, are bleaching and dissolving. Remember, the ocean provides half the oxygen we breathe. If the phytoplankton die, as they did 66 million years ago, the lungs of the planet collapse. We are poisoning the very tank we swim in. We are also adding a new element that nature has no digestion for: plastic. It is now found in the deepest trenches and the highest peaks. It has entered the food chain. Microplastics are in the fish you eat, the water you drink, and even in human placentas. We have merged our synthetic waste with the biological skeleton of life itself. We are becoming plastic. The danger of the Anthropocene is that it is gradual. If an asteroid hit today, we would panic and unite. But climate change is a boiling frog scenario. The heat rises slowly enough that we adapt, we normalize, we rationalize. Our brains are wired to react to sudden threats, lions, explosions, not to statistical trends on a graph. We are biologically ill-equipped to perceive the threat we have created. This cognitive blind spot is our invisible skeleton's greatest weakness. We are smart enough to build the machine, but perhaps not wise enough to operate it. We have the power of gods, but the instincts of primates. We are burning the library to stay warm, not realizing that the instructions for survival are written in the books we are using as kindling. And now, the sleeping giants are waking up. Feedback loops. The permafrost in the Arctic is melting. This frozen ground holds twice as much carbon as the atmosphere. As it thaws, it releases methane, a greenhouse gas 80 times more potent than CO2. This causes more warming, which causes more melting. This is a runaway train. Once these loops start, humans cannot stop them. The system takes over. This is exactly what happened during past mass extinctions. A trigger, volcano or asteroid, started the warming, but the feedback loops finished the job. We are currently pulling the trigger. We are tickling the dragon's tail. We assume nature is linear and predictable, but the geological record shows that nature is chaotic and prone to sudden, violent shifts. History teaches us that no dominant species reigns forever. The dinosaurs had 160 million years. We have had civilization for maybe 10,000. We are a blip. The Earth has recovered from 5 mass extinctions. It will recover from us. The invisible skeleton will heal. New species will evolve to eat our plastic, and the CO2 will eventually be reabsorbed by rocks. The planet will be fine. The question is not, will Earth survive? The question is, will we? We are fragile. We require a very specific range of temperature, oxygen, and calories. The dinosaurs were tough and even they couldn't make it. We have built a civilization that relies on a stable climate, just as that stability is ending. We have built our houses on the beach just as the tide is coming in. Yet we have one advantage the dinosaurs didn't: foresight. The T-Rex didn't know the asteroid was coming. It didn't know about atmospheric physics. We do. We have satellites watching the ice caps. We have models predicting the future. We are the first species to understand the mechanics of our own extinction before what happens. The invisible skeleton of knowledge is our only shield. We have a choice that no other species has ever had. We can choose to be the asteroid, or we can choose to be the shield. We can use our technology to repair the skeleton we broke. We can decarbonize, rewild, and adapt. The asteroid is not a rock in space. It is a decision in our minds. It is the choice between consumption and balance. But what if we fail? What if the machine is too broken to fix? Some look to the stars. They argue that to survive the Great Filter, we must become a multiplanetary species. We must export the seed of life before the Earth resets again. Is Mars our lifeboat? Or is it a fantasy to think we can terraform a dead planet when we can't even maintain a living one? We will look at the future. Not the next election, but the next million years. What comes after the Anthropocene? If humans vanish, what will rise to take our place? Will it be the rats, the crows, or something entirely new? We will explore the post-human Earth. Imagine we disappear tomorrow. Not with a bang, but a whisper. The Anthropocene asteroid vanishes, but the crater remains. The lights go out. The nuclear power plants melt down. The subways flood. But nature does not mourn. In fact, the invisible skeleton begins to heal immediately. Within weeks, the air clears. Within years, vines crush the concrete. The city, our greatest monument, becomes a vertical reef for the new tenants. We think of our cities as permanent, but they are just temporary scabs on the surface of the Earth. Without maintenance, water, the patient destroyer, will dismantle everything. Steel rusts, glass shatters, concrete cracks. In 10,000 years, the pyramids might still be there, buried in sand, but Manhattan will be a pile of unrecognizable sediment. The Earth will swallow our history and use the nutrients to grow a new forest. What will remain of us? Future geologists, if they exist, will find a strange, thin layer in the rock record. They will find technofossils, petrified smartphones, glass shards, and a layer of radioactive isotopes from our atomic tests. But the most prominent marker will be the plastiglomerate rocks infused with plastic. We will be known not as the wise men, Homo sapiens, but as the plastic people, the creators of the synthetic layer. This layer will be a warning sign in the stratigraphy. Just like the KPG boundary layer is full of iridium and soot, our layer will be full of carbon and pollutants. It will tell a story of a species that burned 100 million years of stored energy in a cosmic blink of an eye. It will mark the moment the invisible skeleton caught a fever. We will be the thin, dark line that separates the Holocene from whatever comes next. Who inherits the throne? If history is a guide, it won't be the lions or the elephants. We are taking them with us into extinction. It will be the generalists, the rats, the raccoons, the cockroaches. These are the creatures that thrived in our waste. They learned to navigate the concrete maze. In a post-human world, without our pest control, the rat kings could grow. Evolution, freed from suppression, pushes for size. This is known as speculative zoology. Dougal Dixon predicted the night stalker, a giant predatory bat. It sounds sci-fi, but remember the terror birds? When the niche of apex predator is empty, nature fills it with whatever is available. A rat has the intelligence, the dexterity, and the social structure. Give it 10 million years, and it might develop a language. It might build a fire. It might wonder who built the rusted steel skeletons that lives in. Or perhaps the sky will rule again. Corvids, crows and ravens are frighteningly smart. They hold grudges, use tools, and teach their young. If primates go extinct, birds are the next best candidates for high intelligence. Imagine a corvid civilization building nests in the skeleton of the Eiffel Tower. They wouldn't build with stone and steel. They would weave complex structures. They might sing their history instead of writing it. Their invisible skeleton is different from ours. They see in UV light. They fly. Their perception of physics is aerial. A bird civilization would look nothing like a human one. They wouldn't need roads. They wouldn't need borders. They might be the first species to achieve a global society without destroying the biosphere, simply because they are not burdened by the need to pave the ground. Or maybe intelligence will rise from the deep. The octopus is already solving puzzles, escaping cages, and using coconut shells as armor. They are alien intelligences on Earth. Their only flaw is their short lifespan and lack of social teaching. But if the oceans recover and evolution selects for longevity, could a cephalopod civilization rise in the flooded ruins of our coastal cities? They wouldn't need fire. Fire doesn't work underwater. This means no metallurgy, no steam engines, no plastic. They would build with biology. They might genetically engineer coral into buildings. They might communicate with color-changing skin, creating a language of pure visual emotion. They would be a silent, wet empire, ruling 70% of the planet without ever needing to conquer the land. This speculation highlights a humbling truth. Intelligence is not the destination of evolution. It is just a survival strategy, and a rare one. Most species do fine without it. Sharks have ruled for 400 million years without writing a poem. Bacteria rule the planet without a single thought. Intelligence is expensive. It burns calories. It causes depression. It invents atomic bombs. Nature might decide that the human experiment was too dangerous to repeat. The invisible skeleton might select against high intelligence in the future. The next dominant species might be dumb, durable, and content. The Earth doesn't need a ruler. It needs a caretaker. And usually, the best caretakers are the ones who don't know how to split the atom. Let's jump forward 250 million years. The continents have drifted back together to form Pangaea Proxima. All evidence of humanity has been ground to dust by plate tectonics. The plastic layer has been subducted into the mantle and melted. The CO2 spike we caused has long been absorbed by new limestone. The fever is over. The patient has recovered completely. To this future Earth, we were just a bad weekend. A momentary flu. The invisible skeleton has rebuilt itself into a new shape, new oceans, new mountains, new monsters. The sun is slightly brighter, stellar evolution. The plants are different colors, life goes on. The show continues without the lead actor. This is the ultimate indifference of the cosmos. But life itself, life is nearly indestructible. We talk about saving the planet, but we really mean saving ourselves. The planet has survived impacts that boiled the oceans. It has survived freezing into a snowball. Even if we nuked every inch of the surface, life would survive in the deep rock, in the hydrothermal vents, in the bacterial spores. The invisible skeleton is flexible. It bends, it breaks, but it re-knits. The only thing that is fragile is our specific place in it. We are the leaf on the tree, terrified of the autumn wind, forgetting that the tree itself will stand through the winter. We are not the trunk. We are just a seasonal decoration. Unless we leave something behind that isn't biological. Maybe our true legacy isn't plastic, but code. A satellite drifting in a graveyard orbit. A probe on Mars. An AI buried in a deep bunker, still calculating pi long after its creators have turned to dust. These technological ghosts might be the only proof that we ever thought, that we ever dream, that we ever looked at the stars and felt lonely. This is the final paradox. We are the only species that tries to create immortality. The dinosaurs were content to exist. We are desperate to be remembered. We carve our names into the bedrock, unaware that the bedrock is moving. We scream into the void, hoping the echo lasts forever. We have traced the skeleton from the first impact to the final silence. We have seen how the machine breaks and how it heals. We have seen that we are both the victim and the asteroid. The story of the Earth is a story of cycles. Construction, destruction, reconstruction. We are currently holding the hammer. The question remains, will we put the hammer down? Or will we be the architects of the next layer of fossils? In our final chapter, we will leave the timeline entirely. We will zoom out to the cosmic scale. We will ask if this cycle of civilization and collapse is happening everywhere in the universe. Is this why the sky is silent? We zoom out from the ruined Earth to the silent galaxy. We have been broadcasting our radio waves for a century, screaming, "We are here," into the void. We expect an answer. We expect to find other invisible skeletons wrapped around other stars. But the only thing that comes back is static. This brings us to the most terrifying question in science. Where is everybody? This is the Fermi Paradox. There are billions of stars in our galaxy, many older than the Sun. If life is common and intelligence is a natural evolution, the galaxy should be teeming with civilizations. We should see their Dyson spheres blocking the starlight. We should hear their songs, but we see nothing. Just dead rock and nuclear fire. The invisible skeleton of the cosmos seems to be made of silence. The silence suggests the existence of a great filter, barrier in the evolution of life that is extremely difficult to cross. It is a probability trap that kills off civilizations before they can reach the stars. The story of the dinosaurs gives us a clue. For 160 million years, they ruled, but they never built a telescope. They never launched a satellite. Intelligence is not inevitable. It is a rare accident. Perhaps the filter is behind us. Maybe the creation of complex life is so rare that we are the only winners in the galactic lottery. The asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs might have been a crucial step in that filter. Without that specific rock hitting that specific spot at that specific angle, intelligence might never have evolved on Earth. We might be the orphans of a chaotic universe. Or perhaps the filter is ahead of us. Perhaps civilizations arise frequently, but they all possess the same fatal flaw. They discover technology before they discover wisdom. They burn their invisible skeletons too fast. They change their atmospheres, poison their oceans, or split the atom, and then they collapse. The silence in the sky might be the sound of a billion graveyards. If this is true, then the Anthropocene is not a triumph. It is a test. We are currently walking through the minefield that killed everyone else. The invisible skeleton we are dismantling, the climate, the biosphere might be the universal barrier. The reason we don't see aliens is that no one makes it past the internal asteroid phase. They all commit suicide by consumption. This makes our situation incredibly precious. We are standing on a raft of life in a universe that is hostile to order. The invisible skeleton of Earth, the magnetic field, the ozone layer, the carbon cycle is a masterpiece of balance. It has survived impacts, freezes, and fires. It has incubated consciousness against all odds. To treat it as infinite is the ultimate gamble. We are the universe observing itself. Through our eyes, the cosmos has become aware of its own existence. If we destroy ourselves, the universe goes blind again. The lights go out. The story ends. The responsibility is not just to our children. It is to the very concept of meaning. If we fall, there might be no one left to mourn the stars. The dinosaurs teach us that size does not equal safety. Dominance does not equal longevity. They were the masters of their world, and they vanished in a day because they were too specialized to adapt. We are the masters of our world, but we are becoming too specialized in our technology. We rely on a complex supply chain that is just as fragile as the Cretaceous food web. But we have something they didn't. We have the story. We know what happened to them. We know about the iridium layer. We know about the fern spike. We have the manual. The invisible skeleton is no longer invisible to us. We can see the cracks. We can measure the strain. The only question is whether we have the will to reinforce it before it shatters. We can build a new skeleton, one that integrates technology with biology. We can capture the carbon. We can rewild the continents. We can turn our external skeleton of machines into a life support system rather than a weapon. This is the solar punk future. It is not a return to the caves. It is an evolution to a higher state of efficiency. It is learning to think like a planet. This requires a shift in perspective. We must stop seeing ourselves as the owners of the Earth and start seeing ourselves as its nervous system. We are the part of the planet that thinks. If the brain decides to stop the heart, the body dies. We are currently the brain deciding whether to cut the nerves or heal them. The KPG extinction was a tragedy for the Triceratops, but a blessing for us. Without that asteroid, we would still be shrews hiding in holes. Destruction drives creation. The crisis of the Anthropocene is our asteroid. It is the pressure that will force us to evolve or perish. It will select for wisdom, just as the cold selected for warmth. We are currently in the bottleneck. The tunnel is dark and the walls are closing in. But if we make it through, if we pass the great filter, we will be something new. We will be a species that didn't just survive its planet, but learned to garden it. We will be the first species to grab the wheel of evolution and tear it away from the cliff. So look up at the night sky. It is beautiful, but it is empty. That emptiness is a warning. It tells us that we are alone. It tells us that the invisible skeleton of life is rare, fragile, and temporary. We are holding the candle in a hurricane. The flame is flickering. The asteroid is coming, not from the sky, but from the mirror. We are the impact event, but we are also the recovery. We are the fire, and we are the firefighters. The ending of this story has not been written in the fossil record yet. It is being written right now by the choices we make today. The sky fell once, and the world changed forever. Now we are shaking the sky ourselves. Remember the dinosaurs. Remember the silence. And remember that the ground beneath your feet is not just rock. It is a living machine that keeps you alive. Don't break it. Thank you for watching The Day the Sky Fell. If this journey into the deep time of our planet has shifted your perspective, subscribe to Nightlight Science Stories. We have many more skeletons to uncover in the dark.